The warm Atlanta sun stretched golden fingers across the pristine lawn of a grand Buckhead estate. Inside, Kelvin Blackstone, a 52-year-old titan of real estate, paced the length of his lavish study. Each step pressed his designer loafers deeper into the thick carpet, a symbol of the fortune he'd spent a lifetime building. Yet today all that affluence felt meaningless. His sharp, deal-hardened eyes were now clouded with fury and despair. Clutched tightly in his hand was a sleek smartphone, glowing with messages that had upended everything. His thumb hovered over the call icon, quivering. He drew a steadying breath. "It ends now," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "She didn't leave me a choice." As he pressed the button, the first domino tipped. What he couldn't foresee was that his next move would erupt into headlines across Atlanta, and far beyond. Soon, the name Kelvin Blackstone would echo through the city, tied to a crime that would leave its mark for years to come. 2 years earlier, on a sultry summer night, Atlanta's skyline glittered like diamonds scattered across velvet. Inside an upscale downtown cocktail lounge, 23-year-old Martha Jennings nursed a cosmopolitan, her eyes sweeping the room with a mix of anticipation and nerves. A second sip later, her gaze locked with a distinguished man at the bar. Kelvin Blackstone was impossible to miss in his impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly groomed, his presence commanding. Raising his glass in a silent toast, he offered a charming, self-assured smile. Martha's heart fluttered. This was exactly what she had come for. A friend had introduced her to sugar dating, painting it as a gateway to glamour, ease, and luxury. As a fresh fashion design graduate struggling to make rent, it had been a tempting path. And now, sitting across from what could be her first sugar daddy, Martha felt both excitement and apprehension. Kelvin strolled over, confidence in every stride. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice deep and rich. Martha nodded and gestured to the open seat. "Please." As he sat, she noticed the Rolex glinting on his wrist, the perfect cut of his suit, the way he seemed to own the space. "I'm Kelvin," he said, extending a hand. "And you are?" "Martha," she replied softly, accepting it. His grip was firm, his palm warm. "It's a pleasure, Martha," Kelvin said, eyes locked onto hers. "You're absolutely stunning." Heat rose in her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, sipping again to hide the blush. Kelvin's grin deepened. "Let's talk more over dinner. I know a place you'll love." Martha nodded, unaware that tonight marked the first step on a path laced with desire, secrets, and danger. What began as a clear-cut arrangement quickly blurred. Martha joined Kelvin at exclusive parties, gave him companionship, and shared his bed. In return, he erased her student debt and moved her into a trendy midtown loft. One evening, as they relaxed on a hotel balcony high above the city lights, Martha found herself speaking freely. "I never thought I'd be doing this," she confessed, twirling champagne in her glass. "But honestly, it's been kind of amazing." Kelvin leaned in and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You deserve this, Martha. You're exceptional." She melted into his touch, eyes fluttering closed. Then, softly, "What about your wife?" It was a question she had buried for weeks. Kelvin's hand froze, then slowly withdrew. He sipped his champagne before replying. "Catherine and I, we have an arrangement. Our marriage is more of a business deal these days. She has her world and I have mine." Martha gave a hesitant nod. She didn't fully believe him, but she let it slide. She was already hooked, by the lifestyle, by him. Questioning it too deeply would mean risking it all. As seasons passed, Martha found herself falling harder. It wasn't just the luxury. It was the way Kelvin listened. The way he truly seemed to see her. For the first time she felt valued. Oh. Whenever doubts crept in, she reminded herself, this is what she signed up for. A man who protected her. Took care of her. What she didn't realize was that the real test of their bond was on the horizon, brought on by one chance meeting that would unravel everything. It happened on a gray morning that felt like any other. Martha had ducked into her favorite local coffee shop, sketchpad in hand, working through designs for a new collection. Absorbed in her thoughts, she turned too quickly and crashed into someone, her latte splattering across a crisp white shirt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, fumbling for napkins and trying to clean up the mess. "It's really okay," the man chuckled, taking the situation in stride. "I probably needed a wardrobe change anyway." Martha looked up to apologize again, but the words stuck in her throat. The man standing before her was effortlessly handsome, with warm brown eyes and a smile that made her breath catch. "I'm Matthew," he said, offering his hand. "Martha," she replied, slipping her hand into his and feeling an unexpected jolt at the touch. They ended up talking for hours, the coffee mishap quickly forgotten. Matthew was witty, thoughtful, and engaging. He worked as an accountant but had a deep love for photography. As they talked, Martha found herself captivated by his gentle nature and the sincere interest he showed in her work. "You're a fashion designer?" Matthew asked, his eyes lighting up. "That's incredible. I'd love to see some of your designs someday." Martha blushed, tucking her hair behind one ear. "Maybe you will," she said, surprising herself. When they parted ways that evening, after exchanging numbers and promises to meet again, Martha felt a spark she hadn't felt in ages. It was different from what she felt with Kelvin. Lighter, easier, real. In the weeks that followed, Martha and Matthew grew closer, their connection deepening with every date. But as her feelings for Matthew intensified, so did the weight of her guilt. She hadn't told him about Kelvin, and she hadn't told Kelvin about Matthew. She was leading a double life, and the pressure was beginning to unravel her. One quiet evening, as she and Matthew strolled hand in hand through Piedmont Park, he stopped and looked at her, suddenly serious. "Martha, there's something I need to say," he murmured, eyes uncertain. Her heart pounded. Had he found out about Kelvin? "What is it?" she asked, trying to stay calm. He took a breath. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said softly. "I know it's fast, but I've never felt like this before." A whirlwind of emotions surged in Martha. Happiness, fear, guilt, and something else she couldn't quite name. Without thinking, she kissed him, pouring all her confusion into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Martha knew things couldn't go on like this. A decision had to be made. But she had no idea that choice would soon be ripped from her hands. The following week, Kelvin invited her to a charity gala at his Buckhead mansion. It was extravagant, crystal chandeliers, endless champagne, and Atlanta's elite glittering in their finest. Despite the couture gown Kelvin had gifted her, Martha felt like an outsider. She wore a smile, posed for photos, shook hands with power players, but it all felt like a performance. Stepping away for air, she paused near a group of women in conversation. "Have you met Kelvin's son?" one asked. "He's quite the catch, just made partner at his firm." "Oh yes," another replied. "Matthew, isn't it? Such a handsome young man." Martha's blood froze. Matthew. Kelvin's son. It couldn't be. She turned, just in time to see him across the room. Looking devastatingly handsome in a tux, Matthew was laughing with a small group. Then their eyes met. Recognition flashed in his. His expression faltered, confusion, disbelief, then hurt. He quickly excused himself and walked toward her. "Martha," he said, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" Before she could speak, Kelvin appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist in a possessive grip. "Ah, Matthew," he said, the cheer in his voice forced. "So you've met Martha. She's a very close friend." The silence that followed was heavy. Matthew's eyes widened, then darkened as realization struck. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Martha stood frozen, heart in her throat. Kelvin's arm tightened painfully. "We need to talk," he hissed, guiding her toward his study. The door barely shut behind them before Kelvin exploded. "How long have you been seeing my son?" he snarled, his face twisted in rage. Martha, still stunned, could barely speak. I didn't know," she said. "We met by chance. I had no idea he was your son, Kelvin. I swear." Kelvin paced like a lion in a cage. "It ends now," he growled. "You are never to see him again. Do you understand me? You're mine, Martha. Don't forget that." Martha stared at him, stunned. The sophisticated, charming man she'd known was gone, replaced by someone cold, possessive, dangerous. I need time," she whispered, backing toward the door. "Please, Kelvin. This is too much." His expression softened, but the hardness in his eyes remained. "Of course," he said calmly. "Take all the time you need. But remember what I said, stay away from Matthew." Martha fled the room, her thoughts spinning. She'd been drawn into a twisted web of secrets and betrayal. She was trapped between a father and son. And as she hailed a cab to escape the madness, she knew nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were a blur. Martha shut herself in her apartment, ignoring calls and messages from both men. She couldn't face either of them. On the third day, a knock jolted her from her daze. Heart pounding, she crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Matthew. He looked exhausted and anxious. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. "Matthew," she breathed. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to see you," he said, eyes pleading. "Please. Can we talk?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. As he entered, she noticed the change in him. The spark was gone. His shoulders slumped, dark circles under his eyes. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally Matthew spoke. "I'm sorry, Martha. I had no idea you were involved with my father. If I'd known." "I didn't know either," she interrupted softly, voice cracking. Trembling, Martha clutched Matthew's hand. "You have to believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen." Matthew gently squeezed her hand, the warmth of the gesture sending a fresh wave of emotion through her. "I believe you," he said softly. "But where do we go from here?" He paused, his eyes darkening. "My father, he's not someone you cross, Martha. I've seen what he's capable of." A chill ran down her spine. She had glimpsed Kelvin's darker side before, but hearing it confirmed by his own son made the danger all too real. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, voice cracking. "I care about you, Matthew. More than I ever expected. But Kelvin's done so much for me. I owe him everything." Matthew leaned closer, his grip firm. "You don't owe him anything, Martha. Whatever deal you had, it doesn't mean he gets to own you. You deserve to be free, to be happy. We can figure this out. Together." As she looked into Matthew's eyes, something inside her shifted. For the first time she saw a future filled with hope, not fear. A future built on love, not obligation. "Okay," she said with a breath of courage. "Let's figure it out. Together." Over the following weeks, they met in secret, cafes at odd hours, whispered conversations in parked cars. Slowly a plan took shape. They would leave Atlanta. Start fresh somewhere Kelvin couldn't reach them. Matthew had savings. Martha had been setting aside bits of the money Kelvin had given her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. And for the first time in years, Martha felt a lightness in her chest. Freedom was within reach. But the feeling didn't last. Just days before they were set to leave, Martha's phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. "We need to talk. Come to the house. Tonight. 8 p.m. Her hands trembled as she showed the text to Matthew. "I have to go," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "If I don't, he'll know something's wrong." Matthew pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Be careful," he whispered into her hair. "If anything feels off, anything, you leave. Promise me." She nodded, fear clawing at her throat. She had no idea that night would change everything. The Blackstone mansion loomed in the twilight like something out of a dream, beautiful and menacing all at once. Martha stood at the doorstep, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to turn around. Before she could knock, the door opened. Kelvin stood there, still and expressionless. "Martha," he said, voice quiet and unreadable. "Come in." She followed him through the familiar corridors, now cold and foreign. The study was just as she remembered it. Books, expensive liquor, a sense of control woven into the very walls. Kelvin poured himself a drink, the clinking of ice the only sound between them. He didn't offer her one. "I know about Matthew," he said at last, back still turned. "Did you really think you could hide it from me?" Martha's breath caught. "Kelvin, He turned sharply, eyes blazing. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't insult me with excuses. You betrayed me. After everything I've done for you." "I never meant to hurt you," she said, voice barely a whisper. "It just happened. I fell in love with him before I knew who he was." Kelvin let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Love?" he spat like it was a curse. "You think that matters? You're mine, Martha. Or have you forgotten our arrangement?" Something inside her broke. "I'm not a possession, Kelvin. You don't own me." For a second, he seemed stunned by her defiance. But then the coldness returned. "No," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Then maybe it's time I remind you of your place." He stepped toward her. Martha backed away instinctively, fear rising in her throat. "What are you going to do?" she asked, hating the shake in her voice. He stopped, eyes narrowing. "I'm giving you a choice," he said. "End it with Matthew. Now, if you do, I'll let this go. We'll pretend it never happened." "And if I don't?" she asked, already knowing. His smile was cold, calculated. "Then I'll destroy you both. Matthew's career? Gone. Your dreams of becoming a designer? I'll make sure you're blacklisted in this city. Is that what you want, Martha? To throw everything away for a fantasy?" Martha couldn't breathe. She had known Kelvin was powerful, but this? The cruelty in his threats hit harder than anything she'd imagined. "You're bluffing," she whispered, though even she didn't believe it. Kelvin's eyes gleamed. "Am I? Are you willing to bet your future on that?" Her thoughts spun. Matthew, their future, her career, everything she'd worked so hard for. "I need time," she said finally, voice cracking. "To think." Kelvin's jaw tightened. You have 24 hours. Not a minute more. And Martha. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Don't even think about running. There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you. She stumbled out of the mansion, her tears blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold. The city passed in a blur as she drove aimlessly, until she found herself outside Matthew's apartment. She sat in her car, unsure whether to go in. Should she tell him everything? Would it make a difference? Before she could knock, the door opened. Matthew stood there as if he had been waiting for her. One look at her face was all it took. It didn't go well, did it? He asked gently, pulling her into his arms. And then she broke. Tears spilled freely as she clung to him, the weight of everything crashing down at once. Martha collapsed into Matthew's chest, the weight of Kelvin's threats spilling from her in broken sobs. Matthew held her, silent and steady, his arms a fortress as she recounted every chilling word. When she finished, he guided her to the couch, knelt before her and took her hands. We'll figure this out, he said firmly, eyes burning with resolve. We're in this together, Martha. I won't let him hurt you. She stared into his eyes, into the safety, the certainty he offered. A man who saw her not as a possession but as a partner. She knew in that moment she couldn't walk away from him. Not now. Not ever. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice barely audible. Matthew paused. His brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. Then, slowly, something shifted. A plan began to form in his mind, sharpening his features with quiet determination. We're going to get married. Martha blinked. What? Think about it, he said, urgency creeping into his voice. If we're married, it makes it harder for my father to separate us. It proves this isn't just some fling, this is real. It was impulsive, reckless, and yet, it made sense. But how? She asked. We can't plan a wedding in 24 hours. Matthew gave her a tight, resolute smile. We don't need to. There's a 24-hour chapel just outside the city. We can be married and back before his deadline. The idea hit her like a bolt of lightning, wild and dangerous but thrilling. Her heart raced. Her fears screamed. And yet, she found herself saying the words before she could stop. Okay, let's do it. The next hours blurred, packing bags, making hushed calls, driving through the quiet, moonlit night. As the neon glow of the chapel appeared in the distance, Martha's courage faltered. Are we really doing this? She whispered. Matthew reached for her hand. Only if you're sure. We can turn back now, but whatever happens, good or bad, we face it together. She looked at their entwined fingers, then at his face. His eyes held nothing but love, loyalty, and the future she'd always dreamed of. I'm sure, she whispered. Let's get married. Inside the chapel, under flickering lights and faded velvet drapes, they exchanged vows. No fanfare. No guests. Just them, raw, real, and ready to fight for each other. When they walked out, rings on their fingers, hearts racing with equal parts fear and joy, they had no idea the storm that was about to come. Later that morning, dressed in clean clothes, her wedding dress tucked away in the back of her closet, Martha stood beside Matthew as they stepped into Kelvin's office. The older man's gaze fell instantly on their joined hands, and the rings. His face twisted in disbelief, then fury. What have you done? He spat, rising from his chair. Matthew stepped forward, shielding Martha with his body. We got married, Dad. Last night. We love each other, and we won't let you tear us apart. Kelvin's laugh was sharp and cruel. You think a marriage certificate changes anything? You think I won't crush you both? It's not just paper, Martha said, voice clear and strong. It's a commitment. And whatever you try to do to Matthew, you'll have to do to me too. Kelvin's eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you've started. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The threat slithered beneath his words like a viper. As they walked out of his office, the weight in Martha's chest grew heavier. They had made a bold move. But this war was far from over. Days passed in uneasy quiet. They moved in together. Jumped at every unexpected noise. But there was no retaliation. Maybe he's letting it go, Matthew said one evening, watching the city lights blink on from their balcony. Maybe he knows he can't control us anymore. Martha wanted to believe it. But something in her gut twisted. Kelvin Blackstone didn't surrender. And she was right. 4 days after their wedding, Matthew's phone rang over breakfast. His face went pale as he listened. What is it? Martha asked, dread creeping in. It's my mom, he whispered. She's in the hospital. Dad says she had a breakdown when she found out. Martha's heart dropped. Matthew. I'm so sorry. He shook his head, jaw clenched. He's using her. Manipulating her. This is just the beginning. At the hospital, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Guilt gnawed at Matthew. Martha felt like the ground was crumbling beneath them. One night, after another painful visit, Matthew finally cracked. "Maybe we made a mistake," he said quietly. Martha froze. "What are you saying?" "I love you," he said, voice raw. "But my mom is falling apart. My family is imploding. And it's all because of us." "No," she said sharply, her anger breaking through. "It's because of your father. He's doing this, not us." But the words felt hollow. Doubt crept in. Had they acted too fast? Had love blinded them? The cracks grew wider. Matthew stayed at the hospital more and more. Martha buried herself in her studio, afraid of the silence waiting at home. Then one night as she was packing up, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I can help you fix this. Meet me at Piedmont Park. 10 p.m. Her breath caught. It had to be Kelvin. Despite everything in her screaming "don't go," she found herself driving toward the park. And there he was, Kelvin Blackstone. A dark silhouette beneath the city lights. Waiting. Lights flickered in the distance as Martha approached the shadowy figure beneath the trees. She could see the glint of triumph on his face even before he spoke. "I knew you'd come," Kelvin said smoothly, a smug curl in his voice. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." Martha crossed her arms, trying to hide the tremble in her fingers. "What do you want, Kelvin?" His smile widened, predatory, cold. "I want to offer you a deal. Walk away from this marriage. Leave Matthew. And in return, I'll make sure Catherine gets the best care money can buy. I'll even give you your own fashion line. Your name in lights, your designs on every runway. Everything you've ever dreamed of, yours." Her breath caught. The ground beneath her felt like it was cracking open. "And if I refuse?" she asked, voice barely steady. Kelvin's face darkened. "Then I'll make sure you and Matthew are blacklisted from this city. Neither of you will work again. Catherine will rot in that hospital. And you'll spend every waking moment knowing you could have stopped it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Martha felt her heart splinter, torn between the man she loved and the guilt pressing like a blade against her chest. In Kelvin's calculating eyes there was no compromise, only control. She didn't know it then, but the decision she made that night would ignite a chain of events that would end in tragedy. The days after her secret meeting with Kelvin were a blur of guilt and silence. She didn't tell Matthew. How could she? Every time she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his hands shook after another long day at the hospital, she felt the weight of her secret tighten like a noose around her neck. Matthew, for his part, was slipping away from her. His time was spent at his mother's bedside, his words fewer, his gaze distant. The love that once felt invincible now felt fragile, like glass beneath their feet. A week passed. Then everything fell apart. Martha came home late from the studio, her mind racing, only to find Matthew sitting in the dark, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "Where have you been?" he asked without turning. She hesitated. "At the studio. I told you, I had a deadline." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Right. The studio. You're always there these days." She froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" He stood, swaying slightly. "It means I'm not stupid, Martha. You've been distant. Secretive. Are you seeing someone else?" The words hit her like a slap. "What?" she whispered. "How could you even think that?" "Because nothing makes sense anymore," he snapped. "My mom is in a hospital bed, my father's breathing down my neck, and you're not here." "Not really." "I'm trying." Martha cried, tears rising. "I'm trying to hold everything together. But I can't do this alone." Matthew's voice dropped to a murmur. "Maybe you don't have to." She blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked away. "Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we rushed into this. Maybe, my father was right." It was as if the floor fell out from under her. "Say it," she whispered. "I'm saying maybe we're not ready for this," he said. "For any of this." Something inside her cracked. "Fine," she said, ice in her voice. "If that's how you feel, maybe we should end it now." She turned and stormed out, ignoring Matthew's voice calling after her. The city blurred past her as she drove, tears in her eyes, her heart breaking. But she didn't stop driving. Not until she reached the one place she knew she shouldn't go. Kelvin's mansion. He was waiting, unsurprised. He led her into his study like he'd known this moment was inevitable. "I knew you'd come to your senses," he said, eyes gleaming. Martha stood in the center of the room, feeling like a child lost in a storm. "You win," she whispered. "I'll leave Matthew. Just Just take care of his mother? Kelvin's smile was cold, victorious. Of course, he said smoothly. I always keep my word. But as he stepped toward her, something in his eyes changed. Something darker. Martha's blood ran cold. You know, Kelvin said, voice low and dangerous, I've invested a lot in you. I can't just let you walk away. She took a step back. What are you talking about? We had a deal. Kelvin laughed. A cruel, bone-chilling sound. Oh, sweetheart. Did you really think it was going to be that simple? The next moments blurred into horror. She fought. She screamed. But Kelvin was stronger, driven by a twisted obsession that had been festering beneath his polished exterior. When it was over, Martha lay still on the cold carpet of his study, the life fading from her eyes. Her last thoughts were of Matthew, their laughter, their love, the future they'd once believed in. She wanted to say she was sorry. But it was too late. The next morning, Atlanta woke to horror. A body had been found in Piedmont Park. A young woman. Brutally murdered. As the investigation unfolded, a twisted tale of love, power, and betrayal emerged. The city watched in shock. Martha's name filled every headline. Matthew was shattered. Drowning in guilt. Haunted by regret. If only he'd stayed. If only he'd fought harder. If only he'd believed in her. Kelvin, ever the puppeteer, played the grieving family friend with flawless precision. But behind closed doors he was already plotting his next move. His empire intact. His obsession undiminished. But in time the truth surfaced. As it always does. The whispers became voices. The voices became evidence. Kelvin was arrested. His legacy destroyed. His crimes laid bare before the world. But for Matthew the damage was irreversible. He had lost the love of his life. A love that had once burned so brightly, now extinguished in the cruelest way imaginable. They became a cautionary tale. A reminder of how fear can poison love. Of how power, when wielded without conscience, can destroy everything in its path. And in the quiet moments of his life, long after the world moved on, Matthew would still hear her voice. Still see her smile. Still wonder, could it have ended differently? If only they had held on.